everyone, welcome back to Organizing an ADHD Brain. I'm your host, Megs. I am a professional organizer and coach, and I specialize in helping late diagnosed women with ADHD embrace their neurodiversity so we can find ways to thrive in this life and create a life that celebrates your unique way of thinking. You can expect a new episode to drop every Monday, and sometimes too if the podcast gets a little too long. I started this podcast because I felt lost when I got diagnosed with ADHD a little over 2 years ago. I didn't feel like anyone else was going through the same thing. Now that I know so much, I realize there are so many other women experiencing what I experienced, and I want to make sure that they don't go through it alone. And now that I know so much, I want to share what I know. So that way you don't have to do all the work that I did. You don't have to start your own podcast. I've done it for you. So just listen along and I'll continue to make episodes that make sense for you and your brain. Now listen along and let's go unleash those superpowers. Hey, beautiful people. Welcome back to another episode of Organizing an ADHD Brain. Today we're going to jump into the second half of the interview I did with Shell Mendelson, who is an ADHD career coach. She is incredible. We've got some more truth bombs coming your way today, and maybe something that you need to hear if you're considering changing your job or looking at a different job in your own company, maybe even becoming an entrepreneur one day. Before we jump in, I've got a couple announcements to make. One is that in my Facebook group on Prime Day, Amazon is having on the 16th and 17th of this month, July, I'm going to be dropping some of my favorite organizing tools, tips, tricks, and products in my Facebook group. The caveat to that is that before you buy these items, you're not allowed to buy everything unless you have a place to store everything and you have a place to use everything. But I'm going to talk about things to consider before you buy these items as well. One thing that I find with clients a lot is that when I work with them, they often buy things to fix the problem. But really, one of the biggest things that I always encourage people to do first is to declutter and to figure out what you actually need, because there is no product out there that is going to be a magic solution to having too much stuff. So join me on that journey. My Facebook link is in the show notes below. I have a link tree that'll take you right directly to the Facebook group. If you want to search it on Facebook, my group is Organizing an ADHD Brain, and the picture is a picture of my children's bookshelf that is color coordinated and organized. Of course it is. Of course. I mentioned on Monday that I'm going to be dropping next week an episode about schedule management and how you can start to fit in 15 minutes of decluttering each day. If you're curious on what that looks like, I want to know some questions that you have, whether it's about schedule management or organizing. What are some burning questions that you want me to answer on the podcast so that I can support you in your journey when it comes to ADHD, managing some of the stuff that comes along with how our brain works and how we can live a more organized lifestyle. I also have a free download. It's my daily to-do list that I use every single day. It's something that just helps me get focused, helps to remind me to put reminders in my calendar. It helps me plan my day in a way that I can actually see what is available for me to get done, where I might be able to save some energy, and where I might be overextending myself to understand what my day can actually look like. So check that out in the show notes below. It's just right on my website, mindfulmegs.com. This is the perfect opportunity to go ahead and pause the show and leave a review. This really helps us get noticed by other people who might be looking for support with ADHD, organizing, and just a new podcast to listen to. So thank you so much for your support. I can't wait to read your review on the next podcast that we have. To catch you up to speed with the podcast so far, where we left off on Monday was talking about soul-crushing work situations. So just recognizing that where you are in your job might not be the right fit for you. I worked at a corporation where there were a lot of people that were there until retirement. And then at the very end, I saw a lot of people that were forced to retire, that were forced to be let go and ultimately told that they couldn't work there anymore. I also saw a lot of people that were laid off. I always equate me leaving the corporate world as going through a breakup and moving on with my life, but having to let go of a lot of what I went through in that world. If you ever want to know more, please drop some questions, send me a message, and let me know, because I'm so happy to speak about it. It also helped prepare me for my future. There was a lot that I learned in that world that helped me be ready for a podcast, prepared me for asking the questions that I needed to. And especially when it comes to coaching, I have over 5,000 hours of coaching, just supporting my team and helping them progress through the things that they wanted to do in life. I absolutely loved being a leader, and I absolutely love how it prepared me for being an entrepreneur and a podcast host and so much more in the life that I live now. So while it can be soul crushing, so to speak, there's also so much good that come from the different steps that you take in your life. That does not mean I think that you should go out and do a certain thing in order to get to a next step. It just means listen to your heart. There's no shoulds in life anymore. There's so many different pathways that we can take to get to where we need to be in life. Even if you were to go and talk to someone on the street and say, wow, you're an executive. I would love to be an executive one day. How did you do it so that I can do it too? The truth is that even if you followed all of their advice step by step by step, it's still your story and your journey. And there's no possible way that your story is going to be exactly the same as theirs. Let's jump back into this interview with Shell, and we're going to pick right back up where we talk about working in an uncomfortable situation and just recognizing that it's not the job for you anymore. I think it's okay to admit that too. It's okay to say, I've been doing this for so many years. I feel like now I have an obligation to finish it, so to speak, or get to the end result where I can retire or do this. But in the end, what do you think is the catalyst that helps someone jump into making a change like that?
Well, awareness for one thing, having some awareness of how you're feeling, because the process that I do is really a feelings process. It's like, how do you feel when you just walk in the door? How does the environment make you feel? How do your surroundings, how does your desk make you feel? The equipment you use, how does that make you feel? And the people you're surrounded by and the people you're taking orders from or giving orders to or working with as customers, how does that make you feel? Do you have feelings of dread, or are you tired all the time? Are you losing energy? You name it, the negative feelings. There are quite a few of them that could potentially impact your work. It's fatiguing to be in the wrong job. It really is. It can be very fatiguing. You find yourself distracted quite a bit. You could find yourself bored. That's the worst thing. Bored.
Oh
You know
my
what boredom
gosh.
does for people with ADHD. It's just, you might be in one of these positions, and I hear this a lot, where I get everything done by like 11 or 12, and then I don't have anything to do after that, and I'm bored to death. Well, some people can handle that, but people with ADHD, they might cause a ruckus, you
Yeah.
know? And so at some point, you can last for everybody's different. Some people can last longer than others, but at some point you may be called on the carpet. They might be noticing calling you on the carpet, and then you've heard of these performance improvement programs.
Oh, good Lord. I used to have to
Yeah.
write them. Oh, it was the bane of my existence. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I have a theory about them. I would like to help employers avoid using them. That's
Oh,
kind of a mission of mine,
yeah.
that there are things you can do to actually help the company, because I'll say that first for the employers, but definitely help the ADHD or the neurodiverse employee to not lose faith, lose confidence, and be trashed, basically, because those programs are so damaging to one's self-confidence. I
Yeah.
see people come into my masterclass all the time. Sometimes they're in those programs as they're going through it. It's one of the saddest things I've ever seen because you know that the goal is not for them to win. I've had a few people go through and win, but win what? Go back to that same environment that's not really accepting of them.
Yeah.
What are they winning? So there's no win-win to these programs other than the next step is to get fired. And by that time, your soul is crushed, your confidence is crushed, and you feel like, you failed. There's that sense of failure instead of just being in the wrong job, the wrong fit. I've been asking, now I just put out in my last newsletter to my mailing list, I asked if anybody is like into data analytics and can help with a study of some kind or do a study of some kind of how many neurodiverse people are put into these programs. What are the statistics of neurotypical versus neurodiverse? Wouldn't that be interesting?
I would be so fascinated to know more. Just based on my own experience, I managed a team in a call center. And I know some of the people I had to put on the performance improvement plans were absolutely neurodiverse, but I didn't know enough about it to support them the way that I could now. But also, I shall not be going back into those fields to be able to support them. But that's another thing when it comes to the corporate world and the corporate environment, just even being able to talk about what neurodiversity means in a way that people understand versus a way that's dismissive. Because I think that people hear those words. Like I had a colleague, I actually interviewed her on the podcast, and I remember her coming into one of our team meetings, and she was a fellow leader, and she was like, I just got diagnosed with ADHD. And I remember looking to my director first, like, how are you going to handle this? Like, how should we follow your lead to support her? This is before I had found out. And it was very dismissive. It was very much like, I have no idea what that means, so let's move on from this conversation type of thing. With that said, I think that the more that we talk about this and the more that people are talking about being neurodiverse, I do think that there's more workplace accommodations that are being made available for those people. Have you found that with your clients and the people that you're working with, are there companies that you recommend to them, if that's the career that they work in, that are more neurodiverse friendly?
Here's the thing about what I do. I empower people to create a roadmap for themselves. We call it the career galaxy.
Okay.
And they have to go through a process that is the deep dive, right? So all of these things are identifying your must-haves, your red lines, the things that you need in your work. So who's better to articulate that than the actual person? So I don't make that recommendation. What it does is it empowers them to go into an interview and actually ask questions and to target the right kind of employers that they've done some research on before they even apply.
Yeah.
So now they can kind of get a sense because they know the kind of people they want to work with, so they can suss out the person interviewing them and the way they set this interview up. Sometimes they have these big panels and it's very, very intimidating. Like right away, that tells me something about that company to sort of put you through that mill. Usually, a lot of times it's very hard to get these interviews. They make it very difficult to just get even told, oh, come to the first round. And then they take weeks to get back to you for the second round and the third round. I'm sorry, I could never work for a company like that. Personally, that just wouldn't be my cup of tea.
Yeah.
But people go through it and they think that they have to go through it, and they feel the pressure to go through it, and they feel like it's a big win if they get through it and then they get the job. And then the next thing you know, there's a bait and switch, where they say, oh, you thought you were getting a job doing one thing, and then they put you into another department or have you do something else that isn't what you thought you signed up for.
Oh my
You know what I'm
gosh.
talking about.
Yeah.
This happens a lot. So I always say, here's a big tip. This will be my tip. When you're in the interview, ask this question always. Is the job I'm interviewing for today the position I will be in from day one?
Brilliant.
That's a fair question.
Absolutely it is.
I mean, some will just come out and say, no, we always have people go through this. thing first or do this. And whatever this is could be something completely different or off from wherever your interests lie, right?
Mm-hmm.
And with ADHD, it could be like the kiss of death in terms of that job. It could be not only the wrong fit, but like the opposite of what you need. So it's just kind of a setup. And sometimes they use those other positions as probation. So you're not even doing the job that you thought you were coming in to do,
Yeah.
or you thought you were being hired to do. So there's all kinds of little tricks that employers will have for when they hire people. And I'm not saying this to be mean towards employers, because there's definitely employers that are very advanced and completely the opposite of what I'm describing. What I'm describing are the kinds of situations that are just not good, conducive for the kind of environment that supports people who are neurodiverse. It would not be a good environment because it tells me they probably are not open. They might be kind of closed off, and the ones that are dismissive. Yes, there are companies that are more that way, but I feel like when you know what you need to support you environmentally in your working conditions, when you can be very articulate about that, when you have your own what I call self-accommodation plan, that would be something that's written out that you have identified are the things that you absolutely need. That's one of the things that I go over with in great detail with the people I work with, that you will know in advance, and you'll be able to ask the right questions and say, under these conditions, I am going to be able to perform 100% for you, 150% for you under these conditions. And then you watch and see how they respond to that, right? So you don't necessarily have to say, oh, I have ADHD. I don't always think that that's a wise thing to do because so many people don't know what the definition of that is.
Yeah. Just a quick pause in the show today to bring you a podcast review from early in February of this year. This is when I first launched. So how cool is that? It's titled Amazing. I've really enjoyed listening to this podcast. As much for the information, organizational tips, her personality is so fun. I'm fully engaged in this podcast as soon as I tune in. This is from Glamorize. Thank you so much for the positive feedback. Please take a moment and pause the podcast right now. Leave a review. It really helps the podcast be seen and shared to others who might be interested in learning more about organizing and their incredible ADHD brain. Let's jump back into the show.
There's a lot of prejudice out there and a lot of assumptions that are made and judgments that are made about that. So why, if you know you can do the work and you're there for a reason and it's the right kind of employer and this position is the right fit, the tasks are the kinds of things that you want to be doing, that you're using the skills that you want to be using, all of those things, if all that is there, then there's no reason why you have to spill that you have ADHD. Usually it comes into play when things are kind of already going haywire. They're kind of already, it's like maybe not the point of no return, but it's not at a good place. Let's see if we can accommodate you. And by then you've been there for a while and you've experienced a certain amount of judgment and difficulties in the workplace, and your confidence may be shredded at that point. Let's see if we can accommodate you. And it doesn't always work. It's kind of like a little too late at that point.
I think is so incredible because for a lot of my early adult life, after I got my degree, I felt there was a lot of shoulds. I felt like I had to go find a job, or I should go find a job in the corporate world because that's what I should be doing. There was a lot of things that I should be doing, and then I should be behaving this way because it's what's expected of me. I don't have the ability to stick up for myself, which is what I love about what you do is the empowerment piece. You teach people that they get to decide if they want to work for a company or not. So it's not necessarily just the company interviewing you. You are also interviewing the company, which is so empowering and so incredible as we see the future of work and supporting people in their individual needs, because companies are having to step up now, just as we are having to step up to demand certain accommodations for ourselves. And I love, you don't have to say you have ADHD because people don't know what that means. but talk about what you do need. Talk about how you can deliver, and can they reciprocate based on what you've helped people say. I love that. So cool.
In the testimonials of my class, when people write about it, the thing that warms my heart the most is the confidence that they get, how much more confident they feel. Like they don't feel like they're victims anymore. They're not job beggars anymore. They're what I call job/career developers, literally developing the position to almost customized for them because they know what they want and they can articulate that and ask the questions and not be afraid of asking the questions, knowing full well that they can gauge those responses, and how whatever kind of response they get will tell them if the door is open or if it's not a good door to go through. And to say, well, maybe this isn't such a great fit, and be able to walk away, which is very empowering, by the way, to do that.
Heck
The first time you actually can do that is like freedom. That's the freedom, because good things happen after that. Good things will happen.
One of the best moments of my life was when I went into a career session with my career coach, and I said, we were supposed to be working on my resume that day. And I was like, none of this feels good to me. I never want to work on my resume again. I never want to have to put words on paper to prove myself to someone else. I'm ready to start my own business. I just felt so empowered in that moment to know what was next for me.
I love that. I love that, because I don't do resumes for people. They ask me all the time, do you do resumes? Oh, no. You don't need a resume. The resume might be something as whether you both agree that this is a good fit. And they say, oh, by the way, we need a resume to put in our files or something. That would be the best use of a resume. So they have something for the files. But I mean, people struggle over this. No offense to these resume writers. I mean, I know you mean well, I really do, but I feel the same way you do. I just don't like being judged by words on a piece of paper when they can't see you, they can't hear you, they can't experience who you are. They just see this piece of paper and make a big judgment about you from that. Yeah, it is. It's frustrating. That's why I don't do it. I don't do resumes. I kind of hate doing resumes anyway.
Good for you. Yeah, don't do them. I would
don't.
recommend getting into them. Becoming a professional organizer was really empowering for me, because I teach people how to let go of things in their life so that they can make room for the joy and make room for their happiness. And it's kind of what you're doing in the career stage as well, is like letting go of what you thought it should be like to empower yourselves to let room in for what your life could be like and should be like, because you're allowed to thrive, whether you have ADHD or not. You're allowed to live a life where you're happy every day and your life has meaning to it and purpose. And
that's what the must-haves are all about. It's kind of like extracting everything else, but these are my must-haves. So what you're describing in terms of organizing and keeping things, those are the things you keep, but you have to identify what they are. You have to really be authentic and truthful with yourself, honest with yourself, and then own those things. It's a lot of internal work in that way, because so many of us are just trained to think otherwise, trained to be impacted by what the outside world is wanting and by the status quo. Like, you want to do things differently? This is what they say you have to do, and this is what they say the way you should approach this and what you need. You have to now have a bachelor's degree to do a $15 an hour job, things like that. It's just insane what's going on.
One thing that I think is pretty incredible about every single person I meet with ADHD is that we're not lazy. We're not unfocused. In fact, we've got a lot going on in our lives. And one thing that empowered me was hearing that ADHD can be perceived as a superpower, but not necessarily. We're not superheroes ourselves, but it can be a super powerful tool. Our brains just work in a way that neurotypical people don't necessarily understand. How do you see your brain as a super powerful tool in your own life?
My brain. Well, I'm a lot older than most than you and a lot of the people I work with. I think age has something to do with it, that you just gain a certain amount of wisdom over the years. And then you're just not as willing to accept the things that don't work for you anymore. So for me, the sifting and sorting aspect, yes, no, and just saying, I'm not doing that, which I did earlier when I started my own business. Like, I'm not doing this corporate thing anymore. I'm getting out of here
Yeah.
because I love what I do. I don't have to try. When we really are interested in something and we're really attracted to things and energized by them, we see so many ways we can go with it. Our minds just go crazy with it. We have that creativity and all those ideas that as long as they're within the scope of what our path is, and that's what I help people with, get to that point, and then they can let it go and just really start using that brain, that's superpower, if you want to call it, to create all kinds of new branches on the tree. That's the image I use, is the tree trunk. We lay the foundation at the trunk and we grow our branches throughout our lives once we have that foundation. We're the movers and shakers. We're the ones that are creating.
It's funny because I was just thinking about that the other day, how I've evolved in my own business and organizing. I am always thinking about another way that I could support someone with ADHD find organizing in their own life to be easier and to be
So
less
that's it.
complex. And that's what it is. And building
Yes.
all of these branches. Mhm.
Organizing would be the tree trunk.
Yeah.
Organizing. From there, think of all the places you can go.
Yeah.
It always has to do with that. You could teach, you can you can be a podcaster, you can write a book, you can think of all those things that you can do. So yeah, you're on your way. You're doing great.
It's so fun. Oh, cool. It has been such a pleasure talking to you. Tell
Well,
us, where can my listeners find you?
you can find me by going to Career Coaching with Shell, SHELL, 2Ls.com, or passion2to career.com. And you can go to, there's a little video there, but you can also go to the masterclass page, because that's the bottom baseline for working with me, and schedule an intro call with me if you're interested. And also the book, you can get the book on Amazon and at least get started, but always do it with someone else. There are ways in the book to show you how to stay accountable in your process. So definitely get the book. That's another thing.
So, Unlock Your Career Path, a course for ADHD adults and teens. And we'll drop a link in the show notes below too, so you can easily check it out on Amazon and
Yeah.
see what's next for you. Start to explore those ideas. Because if you're not
See what's
happy,
next.
you can be. There's so
Yeah, and
many
let me know.
opportunities.
Share it. Email me, shell.mendelson@gmail.com. You can email me and let me know. I want to hear from people who've been through it.
So cool. Thank you so much for joining us today, Shell.
Thank you for having me. It was great.
I really enjoyed talking with Shell this week. Like I said, I worked with a career coach when I ended up transitioning out of my corporate career into being an entrepreneur. And I had no idea that this is the path that I wanted to take until I really started to ask myself some hard questions to understand what brought me happiness and joy in life. For me and my personal journey, there's no looking back. I'm so proud of how far I've come. In fact, it has officially been 1 year since I left my corporate career. And I can't believe I'm at a whole year mark. It feels like it just happened yesterday. If you're ever curious about learning more about that jump that I made, please drop me some questions. I'm so happy to share more. If you're looking on trying to figure out how to make that jump yourself. Regardless, hire a career coach or read a book about changing your career. Start asking yourself the hard questions about the different changes that you want to make. Our brains are wired for change. In fact, the only constant in life is change. So expect it, work with it, grow with it, because that's what is so cool about being a human in this life, is growing and learning so much more about yourself so that you can continue to make the right decisions in life. I've got some really great takeaways from this episode for you today. Number one, I love how Shell talks about recognizing how this job might be making you feel. Like walking into a space, how do you feel on a Monday when you walk into work? How do you feel when you walk into your home and you think about work, or at your desk, or working with colleagues? What does that feel like? Are those feelings constantly the same on a regular basis? I remember reading in a book a really long time ago talking about how we might stay in a job because we've got these days that we go in and they're just incredible. We have these really great days at work and it just makes us feel like, oh no, I can do this. But 75% of the time and 90% of the time, it's just really not filling up our cup. It's those 1 or 2 days that make us feel like we can literally do anything that we stay for. But start to recognize the way you feel on a regular basis, because if you're in a job that's toxic, it's something that's not necessarily the best fit for you, it's not going to help you live the rest of your life in a positive way. You may start to take that out on your family, on your coworkers, on your boss. I don't know, you name it. So start to think about that, recognize that. That's the first step, that's just recognizing. Number 2, body doubling is such an excellent way to get things done, especially if you have ADHD. If you are trying to recognize that you need a career change, talk to a friend about it and see if you can meet up once a week. Start to do some research on what you want to do. Maybe it's just reading a book. Maybe you download Shell's book and you start to understand how you could create your perfect path towards success and what you want to do in life. But body doubling is a really great way to do that. I actually do that with a couple of my friends. I sit with them on Zoom. We sign into a Zoom meeting, talk about what we want to do. And then at the very end of the Zoom meeting, we check in and talk about all of the things that we got accomplished. It is pretty incredible what you can do during that time, because the normal executive function challenges that we have aren't necessarily there because we have someone holding us accountable, not necessarily in the sense that they're like, did you do what you said you had to do? But more in the sense that they're just there. With ADHD, I noticed that I could get so stuck in my brain that I'm living this life in my mind and not necessarily in my person, in my body. But when there's a body there, your body doubling, there's a friend there, you're living life in the real world and not stuck up in your brain ruminating on all of the things that need to get done. So it's pretty incredible how that works. I would love to hear your feedback on if that works for you. I do the digital decluttering sessions, and it's such a wonderful way to support people. And then I can help people ask questions and support them through the emotional aspects of things. Number 3, it is okay to find your own path in your career. You can drop the shoulds. You don't have to live life on someone else's terms. You can do it yourself. And it's okay to find life as an entrepreneur. It's okay to find life in a career where you're working for someone else. But the biggest takeaway for me here is it's okay to explore that. Whether you're in your 20s, your teens, your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, it's okay to explore the things that bring you the most joy, because there's so many different things that you could be doing out there. It's okay to start asking yourself the questions. Even if you've worked in the same job for 20 years, you're allowed to make changes. And you're allowed to make changes that bring you happiness. One thing that always helps me in my journey, in my quest for joy and living my best life, is what would my 80-year-old self say? My 80-year-old self is really proud of me. Number 4, I love how Shell talks about advocating for yourself and knowing what your needs are in the workplace. I mentioned in the podcast that a colleague had come forward and talked about having ADHD. She also shared with me that when she moved teams, she didn't once share that she had ADHD. And part of it was because she didn't want to be perceived as how society often perceives people with ADHD. So instead of announcing that you have ADHD, What are your needs that come along with it? Do you need to work from home? Do you need to live in a distraction-free workplace? Do you need to have noise-canceling headphones? Is that something important for you? Do you need to have frequent breaks and lunches? Do you need to have an hour lunch without a peer yelling at you because it's something that you need to re-energize yourself, to really take a step away and, eat and go to the bathroom? Because sometimes if we're in hyper-focus mode, we don't always take care of our personal needs. And it's important to recognize that. So I really like the idea of understanding what those needs are so that you can advocate for yourself in your current work environment or in one that you're being interviewed for, so that you know if it's going to be a good fit or not. You get to decide that. You get to decide, because I do really agree. If you're interviewing for a workplace that is going to have your back, you're going to realize that in the interview process. And in my opinion, a lot of these workplaces have these outdated processes for hiring people because we put up with it. Because people show up and they're willing to go through the rigmarole and feel like they need to show up and they're just waiting for answers, because it's kind of what we've been taught our whole life, that the system is hierarchical. We need to listen. We need to obey. We need to show up and do what they say until they give us a job and pay us the money. But there's so much more to life than that. I don't know. This is getting into a whole nother conversation, but I think there's so much to be said and to advocate for ourselves, because there are a lot of workforces out there that are willing to give you what you need, because you're essentially showing up to propel their company forward. If you are going to make them more money based on them accommodating you, okay, who wouldn't want to do that? And number 5, we are an incredible group of people. People who are neurodiverse, people who are neurotypical, humans in general are awesome. But if your brain is a little bit different, that's okay. There's so many different ways that you can learn to work with it so that you can live a life that is so much more than trying to just get through the day-to-day. You're allowed to wake up and feel like you're living a life worth living. You're allowed to go to sleep at night and feel so grateful for the life that you got to live that day. We only get one life to live, so why not live it fully every single day? We're allowed to. Has anyone ever given you that permission? I'm giving you that permission. Go find a career that fills up your cup. Go find the people that just help you elevate your life. I believe in you. It is such a pleasure coming to you each week and sharing this podcast with you. I absolutely love doing this. Follow along in any way that you can. Join my email list. Join my Patreon, which is a link in the show notes below. Follow the podcast, leave a review, and thank you so much for being here. You all deserve so much to live a life where your stuff is not overwhelming you. Just want you to know that. And you are so capable of doing that. If you want to get started right away, reach out to me. I dropped a link to my calendar in the show notes below so that you can get in touch with me right now and find a spot on my calendar, see if coaching is the right option for you. I also do some individual decluttering sessions, so if that makes more sense for you too, check that out as well. I'll see you on Wednesday. The content of this podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. I am not a doctor or medical professional. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. Oh, I did this new feature where you can actually send me a text message. So if you scroll down to the show notes, you can click a little button and it'll send me a text. Share your thoughts. It's so easy because there's a button for it. So cool. I mean, there's other ways to get in touch with me in the show notes too, but try it out. You guys are amazing. If you would like to support the podcast in any way, shape, or form, please consider joining my Patreon account where I'll post some additional content and some wise words from me, if you will. Join my Facebook page like and share this podcast with whomever you think could benefit. I also have this amazing woman who is my friend. She owns a small batch skincare business in Colorado, and I have been using her CBD bath bombs forever. And my code, I have a code that you can use to save 10%. If you use that code, you can order bath bombs for yourself and have it sent to you. I actually just had my father order the direct pain cream, and it is incredible. I use it for cramps, and he used it for his knee that was giving him a ton of pain. And he looked at me after he put it on. First, I had to promise him he's not going to get high, right? And he laughed at me, but also I think he was relieved that I confirmed that for him. But he looked at me and he was like, I can't believe this is working right now. He's taking aspirin, he's taking all of these other things to try to get the pain to diminish in any way. And this direct pain cream works. So check it out. Use my code to save money and you can have it shipped to you. So it doesn't matter where you are. Additionally, me and my husband use HelloFresh. I'm not sponsored by them in any way. So these are literally just free boxes that we can give away. So I put a code down in the show notes below. If you sign up for a free box, then we get to feed our family for a week for free. So thank you so much for supporting us. And you get to eat as well. So how about that? What a world we get to live in.